The restaurant buzzed with the quiet clinks of crystal glasses and the murmur of well-dressed patrons enjoying their evening. In the heart of this luxurious setting, Elena sat alone at a small table, sipping her wine and observing the scene around her. The dim lighting cast shadows across her face, accentuating her determination and independence. She was used to navigating life on her own, far removed from the opulence that surrounded her tonight. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, a hint of vulnerability lingered. She wasn't searching for extravagance, but for a break from her monotonous routine, a moment to recharge in a world that often felt heavy. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A hush fell over the room as a man entered, a striking figure who commanded attention without uttering a word. Victor, the notorious Bratva boss. His reputation preceded him, the mere mention of his name enough to instill fear and reverence in the hearts of many. Attracted by an undeniable magnetism, Elena's gaze was drawn to him. Clad in a tailored black suit, his presence radiated power, yet it was the coldness of his demeanor that intrigued her the most. He moved with purpose through the restaurant, each step calculated, each glance deliberate. "What are you looking at?" a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was a server, his tone teasing as he followed her gaze. Not many dare to stare at Victor. Elena smiled faintly, refusing to break her gaze. "I'm just admiring the view," she replied, a hint of defiance in her tone. "Just be careful," the server warned, glancing nervously in Victor's direction. "He's not someone you want to cross paths with." The words hung in the air, and Elena felt a thrill ripple through her. She had grown tired of being merely a spectator in her own life, and the allure of danger suddenly felt intoxicating. Victor, with all his mystery and darkness, seemed like a person who could pull her out of her ordinary existence. As the moments passed, Victor paused at another table, speaking with a few men who were clearly in awe of him. Their laughter masked the tension lacing their conversation, an undercurrent of something unspoken hanging between them. Elena's curiosity deepened. She had always been drawn to those who carried an air of command, but Victor was something else entirely. He held the past in his eyes, and she sensed a turbulent story lurking beneath his imposing exterior. Suddenly, his gaze swept through the room, landing on her. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked, and the world around them faded into a blur. In that silent exchange, Elena felt a jolt of understanding, a connection that was both thrilling and terrifying. Victor's expression hardened, as if he were poised to dismiss her, but there was something else, a flicker of intrigue. Before she could overthink it, Victor approached her table, the intensity of his presence suffocating yet exhilarating. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice smooth, laced with a hint of an accent that sent shivers down her spine. Elena cleared her throat, trying to maintain her composure. "I suppose the view is better with company," she replied, a playful smirk dancing on her lips. As he sat down across from her, the air thickened with unspoken tension. They exchanged pleasantries, but Elena's thoughts were racing. His confidence and allure were intoxicating, pulling her into a world she had only glimpsed through the pages of books or the silver screen. This was the kind of man who had everything, and yet there was a vulnerability lurking just under the surface of his icy demeanor, a flicker of loneliness that she recognized all too well in herself. "Tell me, Elena," Victor said suddenly, leaning in slightly, "what does a woman like you seek in a place like this?" She paused, taken aback by the sudden focus of his question. "I could ask you the same," she replied, her defiance flaring again. "But unlike you, I'm not looking for trouble." A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, and she realized she had struck a chord. Trouble often finds us, regardless of our intentions, he replied, his tone shifting, more contemplative. But there are many kinds of trouble, some worth seeking out. Elena met his gaze, feeling a surge of confidence. And you thrive in chaos, don't you? Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, an intrigued expression replacing his intensity. You're perceptive. Most would shy away from what I represent. I'm not most people, she asserted, her voice steady now. The air crackled between them, an unmistakable chemistry igniting in the charged atmosphere. She couldn't ignore the way he studied her with an intensity that felt like a challenge, as if he was attempting to decipher her very essence. The conversation shifted, and they shared stories about their lives, though Elena was acutely aware Victor was holding back, carefully choosing his words. He spoke of ambition and power, yet there was a shadow that lingered around him, hinting at a deeper, more dangerous existence. Elena's heart raced, drawn in by his mysterious aura, and she felt herself crossing an invisible line. As their interaction deepened, she noticed the subtle movements of his hand, his fingers lightly brushing against the table. Unconsciously, she mirrored him, their connection intensifying with each heartbeat. There was an undeniable attraction, a magnetic pull that neither could ignore. Just as she began to lose herself in his dark charm, the reality of his world loomed in the back of her mind. But as the evening stretched on, Elena's thoughts shifted from caution to curiosity. Who was he, really? What did he want with her? The allure of his dangerous lifestyle danced in her mind, igniting a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she felt exhilarated, aware that her life was about to change. Little did she know, this chance encounter at the high-end restaurant would unravel a path filled with unexpected turns, drawing her deeper into a world of power, manipulation, and a romance that would test her resolve. As Victor stood to leave, he looked back at her, his expression unreadable, yet full of promise and mystery. "I hope to see you again, Elena," he said, his voice lingering in the air long after he had walked away. Elena exhaled, the heat of their exchange still swirling around her. It was clear that this was just the beginning, and the intrigue surrounding Victor was only a taste of what lay ahead. What she didn't realize was that the universe had already set her on a collision course with the dangerous world of the Bratva, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever anticipated. Elena felt the weight of Victor's gaze as he settled into the seat across from her, a predator sizing up its prey. The air crackled between them, thick with tension and unspoken words. She had always prided herself on her ability to read people, but Victor was an enigma. His cold confidence was intoxicating, yet she sensed the storm brewing beneath the surface, a tumultuous landscape that could easily swallow her whole. As they exchanged trivialities, Elena's mind was racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping onto a stage where the stakes were dangerously high. Victor's sharp eyes seemed to analyze her every move, searching for weakness. "So, what brings you to a place like this?" he asked, his voice low and smooth, each word dripping with curiosity. "I could ask you the same," she replied, her defensiveness surfacing. "But that's obvious, isn't it? You're here to do business." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, momentarily softening the harsh lines that defined him. "You're perceptive, but the question is, how much do you really know about the business I'm involved in?" Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the back of the restaurant. A group of men surged forward, their voices raised in anger. Elena's heart raced as she turned to see Victor's demeanor shift instantly. The playful glint in his eyes vanished, replaced by a steely resolve. He stood, towering over the table, the atmosphere around him shifting from casual to dangerously charged. Elena watched entranced as Victor approached the disturbance. The men were clearly agitated, their gestures frantic as they confronted him. It was a negotiation gone sour. She couldn't hear their words, but the tension was palpable, reverberating through the air. "What's happening?" she murmured to the server, who had returned, his face pale. "Trouble," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "You should leave." Elena shook her head, unable to tear her eyes away from the unfolding scene. Victor, with an air of authority, calmly asserted his dominance over the situation. His tone was low, but even from a distance, she could feel the power radiating from him. The men, visibly distressed, seemed to waver under his glare. Suddenly, one of them, a burly man with a tattoo snaking up his neck, thrust a finger into Victor's chest, a challenge that could easily have provoked violence. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She could sense the danger, the thin line between negotiation and confrontation. But Victor remained unfazed, his expression unreadable. With a swift motion, he gestured to a nearby table where a couple of his associates sat, observing the exchange with detached interest. Victor's voice rose above the din, a commanding presence that silenced the others. "You want to negotiate? Then you'll do it respectfully, or not at all." Elena felt a wave of admiration wash over her. Here was a man who commanded respect without raising his voice, who could wield power simply by the weight of his presence. Yet, a prick of fear gnawed at her. This was the world she was drawn to, yet so utterly unprepared for. As the argument escalated, Victor suddenly turned, his gaze locking onto Elena's. It was a brief moment, but in that instant, she felt as if he was drawing her into his world, pulling her closer to the darkness and danger that surrounded him. There was a silent understanding between them, a shared acknowledgement of the stakes involved. The situation finally diffused as Victor made his demands clear, his words sharp and deliberate. The men, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat, their bravado faltering. As they turned away, Victor's eyes remained fixed on Elena, a flicker of something more than just business burning in his gaze. "Are you all right?" he asked when he returned to the table, his voice now softer, more intimate. The contrast between his earlier fierceness and this sudden gentleness disarmed her. "I'm fine," she replied, her heart still racing. "But that was intense." He leaned back, a hint of satisfaction playing at the corners of his mouth. "This is my world, Elena. It can be ruthless, but it's also exhilarating." A thrill coursed through her veins at his words, igniting a fire she hadn't expected. "Exhilarating? You think this is exciting?" "Everything comes with a price," he said, his gaze penetrating. "Even excitement." Elena's heart thudded in her chest as she grappled with the implications of his statement. She had always viewed herself as grounded, stable, someone who preferred predictability. But Victor challenged that notion. He represented everything she had been afraid to embrace. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I see something in you," he replied, his tone sincere. "You're not like the others. You have a strength that intrigues me." Elena felt a rush of warmth at his words, mixed with an unsettling sense of vulnerability. She had never been one to rely on others, yet there was an undeniable pull towards Victor, a connection that both frightened and thrilled her. "I'm just an ordinary woman," she countered, her defenses rising again. "You're the one who lives in a world I can only imagine." "Ordinary is a relative term," he said, leaning in closer, his voice a low murmur that sent shivers down her spine. "What's ordinary to you might be extraordinary to someone else." Before she could respond, a chill swept through the restaurant. The air thickened with a sense of foreboding as another figure entered, this one cloaked in shadows and intent. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the man, a rival she had only seen in news articles. The tension in the room felt electric, and she instinctively grasped the edge of the table, her heart pounding. "Stay close," Victor instructed, his voice sharp as steel. "We're not done here." Elena's mind raced. What had she stepped into? As the implications of Victor's world began to unravel before her eyes, she felt the ground shift beneath her. She was caught in a web of danger, excitement, and an attraction that was becoming harder to ignore. The stakes were higher than she had anticipated, and she was perilously close to losing herself in this new reality. In that moment, the thrill of the unknown consumed her. Elena knew she was standing on the precipice of something monumental, and despite the danger, there was no turning back. The path ahead may be fraught with peril, but it was also lined with possibilities that might finally lead her to a life outside the confines of her ordinary existence. "Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes," she thought, her resolve strengthening as she prepared to dive headfirst into the chaos that surrounded Victor, the man who had unknowingly begun to unravel her carefully constructed world. Elena took a steadying breath as she felt the weight of Victor's gaze still lingering on her even after the commotion had dissipated. The remnants of tension hung in the air like the delicate scent of the expensive perfume wafting from nearby tables. She could still see the intensity in his eyes, an echo of the formidable power he wielded. A shift in the atmosphere whispered promises of revelations yet to come. "Let's move somewhere private," Victor suggested, his voice low and commanding, dismissing the surrounding chaos with a wave of his hand. The moment hung between them, an invitation wrapped in the allure of the unknown. Against her better judgment, curiosity tugged at her, and she nodded, following him as he led the way through the elegant restaurant, past opulent decor and curious patrons. They entered a secluded room, the dim lighting casting a warm glow over dark wood furnishings. The air was noticeably quieter, offering a reprieve from the bustle outside. Victor closed the door behind them with a measured finality, a gesture that seemed to seal them in this intimate bubble. Elena could feel the change within her, a mix of excitement and trepidation. Here, she was no longer just an observer. She was part of his world. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing to a plush chair across from his. He settled into his own seat, the distance between them now only a breath away. "I want to talk about what happened back there." His tone was serious, yet there was a hint of something softer, a flicker of vulnerability that intrigued her. "I'm not afraid of a little chaos," she replied, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. "But it seems you are." Victor raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. "You think you know me, Elena?" His voice held an edge, but she could see the challenge glimmering in his eyes. "Powers like mine come with heavy burdens." The phrase resonated with her, stirring something deep within. "What kind of burdens?" She leaned forward, captivated by the moment. Victor studied her, his expression shifting to something more introspective. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. People see the suits, the power, and the wealth, but they don't see the solitude. They don't see the people you lose along the way." His voice softened, a rare glimpse into the man behind the facade. Elena's heart ached for him, a feeling she hadn't expected to emerge. She found herself wanting to know more, to understand the man who stood before her, so confident yet carrying the weight of a tumultuous past. "I may not know you completely, but your actions speak volumes," she offered gently. "You handled that situation with remarkable ease. It was impressive." "Impressive?" Victor echoed, a hint of amusement returning to his features. Or terrifying? Both, she admitted, her pulse quickening. But it's not just your reputation that draws people in. There's a depth to you that... She hesitated, unsure if she should continue. That you want to uncover, he finished for her, his eyes piercing into hers. I'm not an open book, Elena. I've made decisions that haunt me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Elena felt the chemistry simmering just beneath the surface, a magnetic pull that both thrilled and frightened her. What if I want to know more? She challenged, emboldened by the connection they seemed to be forging. Then you should be prepared for what you might find, Victor replied, his voice low, yet the intensity in his gaze held a flicker of something soft and genuine. This world is not kind to the curious. It devours the weak. Yet here I am, she gestured between them. Curiosity keeps me alive. Or it gets you killed, he countered, but there was no malice in his tone, only a raw honesty that stirred something deep within Elena. The intensity of their conversation ignited a fire in her, a sense of purpose that was both thrilling and terrifying. Tell me about your past, Victor, she urged, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. What burdens do you carry? He inhaled deeply, the vulnerability in his eyes growing heavier. I grew up in a world where survival meant sacrificing parts of yourself. Loyalty, love, those are luxuries I can't afford. Elena felt her heart race at his admission. But you still crave connection, don't you? A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he masked it with indifference. Connections make you weak. They can be exploited. Is that why you hide behind this facade? She pressed, her gaze unwavering. Because you fear being vulnerable? For a fleeting moment, the walls he had built around himself seemed to waver. You're perceptive, he conceded, leaning back in his chair. But it's not just fear. It's a reality I've faced time and again. I protect what's mine. What if I want to be part of that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The air between them thickened with unspoken possibilities, and she felt a surge of courage bubble within her. Then you must accept the consequences, he replied, his expression serious yet tinged with a spark of intrigue. But be warned, Elena, this world pulls no punches. In that moment, Elena felt the weight of his words, a promise wrapped in danger. She knew she was stepping into a realm where the stakes were high, yet something inside her longed for the thrill, the unpredictability of being near him. The chemistry between them was undeniable, a force that complicated everything she thought she knew about herself. Suddenly, Victor leaned closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. If you want to dive deeper into my world, you'll have to trust me. Trust is earned, not given, she replied, her heart pounding. But I'm willing to see where this leads. He held her gaze, a silent agreement passing between them. Their connection deepened, marked by an understanding that they were both stepping into uncharted territory. As they sat in the dim light, the boundaries of their lives began to blur, and the future stretched out before them, fraught with promise and peril. Elena felt a thrill rush through her, one that ignited a determination she never knew she possessed. Here, in this moment, she was no longer just an observer in Victor's world. She was becoming an integral part of it. And as the shadows danced around them, she knew that whatever lay ahead would change everything. Elena's heart raced as she felt the weight of Victor's intense gaze, leaving her with a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. The air in the room felt charged, almost electric, as if they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. You want to know about my past? Victor's voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it commanded attention. Let me tell you this, Elena. It's riddled with shadows and secrets. She leaned in, the dim light illuminating her determination. Everyone has their shadows, Victor. What makes yours different? The question hung in the air, challenging yet inviting. His expression shifted, revealing a glimpse of the man cloaked beneath layers of power and protection. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if assessing how much to reveal. "There's a price for knowledge," he said, his tone shifting to one laden with gravity. "Especially in my world." As he spoke, the door creaked slightly, a reminder of the outside world that lingered just beyond their bubble. Before Elena could respond, the silence was shattered by a loud crash from the hallway. Startled, both Elena and Victor turned towards the door. "What was that?" she asked, her pulse quickening. Victor's demeanor shifted instantly, focus sharpening as he stood to assess the situation. "I need to check," he said, moving towards the door. "Stay here." The urgency in his command sent a thrill of fear through her, and she nodded, her instinct to obey mingling with a need to understand the threats that surrounded him. As Victor opened the door, Elena caught a glimpse of the restaurant's main floor, now filled with confusion. Guests were rising from their seats, murmurs escalating into panicked whispers. A group of men, their presence imposing and menacing, were pushing their way through the crowd, their body language radiating hostility. "Victor!" one of the men shouted, his voice dripping with disdain. Elena's heart sank as she recognized him from previous encounters, one of the leaders of a rival gang. "What do you want, Dmitri?" Victor's tone was cold, but there was an underlying current of tension that suggested he was holding back. "I came to remind you that this is a dangerous game you're playing," Dmitri sneered, stepping closer, flanked by his equally intimidating companions. "You think you can just take what isn't yours?" Elena could feel the fear creeping in, not just for herself, but for Victor. This was no longer a simple conversation. It was a declaration of war, and she was caught in the crossfire. "Get out," Victor commanded, his voice low but resonant, echoing authority that sent shivers through Elena's spine. Yet she felt a surge of courage. She couldn't just stand by and watch him handle this alone. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, stepping up beside Victor, surprising both him and Dmitri. Dmitri's eyes flickered with amusement, but there was a dangerous glint. "And who do you think you are, little girl?" he mocked. Victor shot Elena a glance, a mix of disbelief and concern, but she felt a new resilience swelling within her. "I'm not just someone in your way," she responded boldly, her voice steady despite the tension thickening in the air. "I know more than you think. I've heard the stories." Dmitri's smirk fell momentarily, replaced by a scowl. "Stories don't matter here. Only strength does." Victor moved closer to Elena, a protective instinct flaring within him. "Enough, Dmitri. Leave now, or I'll make you regret it." The threat hung heavy in the air, but Dmitri only laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Do you think you can intimidate me, Victor? You forget the power I hold." With a swift motion, Dmitri reached into his jacket, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. Victor's body tensed, ready to react. "Step back," he ordered Elena, his voice fierce, but she remained rooted to the spot, unwilling to let fear dictate her actions. "Victor, I can handle this," she insisted, her words surprising even herself. Just moments ago, she had felt like a mere spectator, and now, standing beside Victor, she felt a spark of strength. Dmitri laughed again, his confidence palpable. "You think you can stand against me? This isn't a fairy tale." Elena took a breath, glancing at Victor, who seemed torn between protecting her and confronting the rival gang member. "He's right, Victor, but maybe that's exactly what you need, a different perspective." Dimitri's amusement waned as he considered her words, his expression shifting to one of annoyance. "You're playing a dangerous game, girl." "And you're underestimating me," Elena replied, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. The tension between them crackled, a standoff where courage met arrogance. "Enough of this charade," Dimitri snapped, his voice rising, but Victor stepped forward, shielding Elena with his presence, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "You'll leave here now, or you'll regret crossing me," Victor asserted, his authority undeniable, but the threat of violence loomed larger than ever. As Dimitri hesitated, Elena sensed an opening, a chance to turn the tide. "Victor, what if we make an agreement, a truce at least until this gets resolved?" Victor glanced at her, surprise etched on his face. "A truce?" "Yes," she pressed. "If we can find common ground, perhaps we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed." Dimitri raised an eyebrow, the wheels visibly turning in his mind. Interesting proposition. Victor's eyes bore into hers, seeking answers she didn't have. "Elena, I can handle myself," she interrupted, determination shining in her gaze. The walls that had once confined her began to crumble, a new strength blooming in the face of danger. Victor hesitated, torn between instinct to protect her and the undeniable truth of her courage. "Fine," he relented, his voice low and measured. "But if anything happens—" "You'll be right there," she finished, feeling a surge of adrenaline. The moment stretched, a fragile alliance forming amidst the chaos. Dimitri smirked, his demeanor shifting as he considered the situation. "Fine then, but know this, I won't forget this day." With that, he signaled his men to retreat, leaving behind a lingering tension that crackled in the air. As the rivals dispersed, Elena turned to Victor, her heart racing with the aftermath of their confrontation. "I didn't mean to put you in danger," she breathed, her voice trembling slightly. Victor's expression softened, the layers of ice thawing just a fraction. "You didn't. You showed courage where I expected fear." "Maybe that's what I've been trying to find," she admitted, her heart racing, not just from the confrontation, but from the connection they were forging. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a gesture both tender and protective. "But this world," he began, his voice trailing off as he searched for the right words, "it's not kind to those who dare." "Then let's be unkind together," Elena replied, her resolve settling deep within her. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a promise forged in the fires of conflict, binding them closer amidst the looming uncertainties ahead. "Together?" he echoed, the weight of their situation settling in, yet the spark ignited between them flickered with newfound intensity. The night was far from over, the shadows of the past looming ominously, but they had taken the first step into a new realm of courage, together. Elena's heart pounded furiously as she faced the standoff between Victor and Dimitri, the air thickening with unspoken threats. The room felt smaller, the shadows growing larger. She could sense the tension radiating off Victor, the way his muscles coiled like a spring, ready to unleash. Yet there was something else, a flicker of uncertainty behind his stoic facade that urged her to step forward, to take control of the situation that had spiraled out of their grasp. "Victor, we can't let this escalate," she said, her voice surprisingly calm despite the chaos surrounding them. Dimitri's mocking laughter echoed in her ears, but she focused solely on Victor, willing him to understand her resolve. "You can't face this alone." Victor's gaze flickered to her, the surprise evident in the depths of his stormy eyes. For a moment, it seemed like the world outside faded away, leaving just the two of them in this fragile moment. But it was short-lived as Dmitri stepped closer, his smirk returning with a vengeance. "You really think you can save him, little girl? This isn't your world." Elena squared her shoulders, steeling herself against his belittling words. "Maybe not, but I'm not your prey either." She felt a newfound strength surge through her, emboldened by the knowledge that she had more power than she ever realized. This wasn't just about her survival anymore. It was about standing alongside Victor, proving her worth in a world that thrived on dominance and fear. Dimitri's demeanor shifted, amusement replaced by a flicker of irritation. "You don't know what you're getting into. You're playing at a dangerous game." His voice dropped lower, laced with malice. "And I'll make sure you regret it." "Enough with the threats," Victor interjected, his voice a low rumble. "If you want a fight, let's take it outside. I won't have you disrupting my business here." The authority in his words was palpable, but there was a hint of desperation buried beneath the surface. Elena could see it, his vulnerability, the cracks in his armor. Dimitri's eyes narrowed, calculating. "You think you can dictate the terms, Victor? You're not the only one with connections." He motioned to his men, and Elena's stomach dropped. They were outnumbered, and the stakes had just been raised. "Do it, and you'll regret it," Victor replied, his voice steady but his body tense. Elena felt the weight of his protective nature, the fierce determination to shield her from harm. It both thrilled and terrified her. She couldn't let him bear this burden alone. With a deep breath, she stepped between them, her heart racing. "If you want to intimidate someone, you'll have to deal with me first." Her challenge surprised even herself, but she didn't back down. The fire within her ignited, fueled by the realization that she had a voice, one that could disrupt the balance of power in this room. Dimitri's laughter echoed again, this time tinged with irritation. "You're courageous, I'll give you that. But courage won't save you here." His eyes darted to Victor. "And you, Victor, you've let your emotions cloud your judgment. Your weakness is showing. Watch your mouth." Victor's voice cut through the air like a knife, low and dangerous. "I am not weak, and neither is she." The assertion struck Elena with surprising warmth, the protective instinct in his voice wrapping around her like a shield. But the moment was shattered as one of Dimitri's goons shifted restlessly, his hand twitching towards his jacket. Victor's body tensed, preparing for a confrontation, ready to defend Elena at all costs. "Dmitri, you don't want to do this," Victor warned, his voice a fierce growl. The Bratva doesn't take kindly to threats, especially from pathetic men who can't respect boundaries. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from behind them as another body slammed against the door, sending it careening open. A figure stumbled into the room, an ally of Victor's, Nikolai, breathless and wide-eyed. "Boss, we've got trouble. They're coming for you." Elena's heart sank as chaos erupted anew. Dimitri's smirk faltered, replaced by a look of urgency. "This isn't over, Victor. I'll be back." With that, he gestured to his men, and they retreated, but not without casting one last menacing glance at Elena. As the door slammed shut behind them, Victor turned to Nikolai, his expression a storm of frustration and concern. "What do you mean, trouble? Who is coming?" "There's been a betrayal, Victor," Nikolai replied, his voice tight with urgency. "One of your own has been feeding information to Dmitri. We need to regroup and figure out our next move." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The danger had escalated from external threats to internal betrayal, and she was caught in the eye of the storm. "What does that mean for us?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of uncertainty. Victor's gaze locked onto hers, and in that moment, she saw not just the Mafia boss, but a man grappling with loyalty and trust. It means we need to be cautious. Trust is a fragile thing in my world. His vulnerability shone through the cracks of his hardened exterior, and she felt the urge to bridge the distance between them. "I can help," she said, her voice steady. "If someone is leaking information, I can find out who it is. I know the ins and outs of the city, and I can blend in where you can't." Victor hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "You're not involved in this life, Alina. It's dangerous." "I'm already in this. I won't let you face this alone," she insisted, her determination unwavering. It was time to show him that she was more than just a bystander. He studied her for a moment, the tension hanging heavy in the air. Then, slowly, he nodded, a grudging respect forming in his gaze. "Very well, but you listen to me, and you stay close. No reckless moves." Alina's heart soared. This was her chance. Not just to prove herself, but to demonstrate that she was capable of navigating this world alongside him. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was the connection between them, a bond forged in fire, tested by chaos, and now strengthened by shared purpose. As they prepared to face the unknown together, the threat of Dmitri loomed large in their minds. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time, Elena felt the exhilarating promise of power. Her journey into Victor's world had just begun. Elena barely had a moment to process Nikolai's sudden entrance before he rushed into the fray, his breath coming in quick bursts. "Boss, they're mobilizing outside. Dimitri's made a move." The urgency in Nikolai's voice shattered the tension in the room, transforming it into something more chaotic. Victor's eyes darkened as he processed this new information, the weight of his decisions pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Mobilizing how?" Victor demanded, his voice low but filled with an intensity that made Elena's heart race. She caught the flicker of concern in his eyes, a reminder that even the mighty could feel the pressure of impending danger. "They've got a few men stationed, ready to back Dmitri. He's not just here to talk," Nikolai warned, his expression grave. Elena felt the atmosphere shift, the stakes rising higher than she had ever imagined. The realization that they were cornered hit her like ice water. "We have to get out of here," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear that threatened to creep in. "If they're ready to fight, we need a plan." Victor's gaze turned to her, surprise mingled with admiration. She was no longer just an accessory in this dangerous game. She was a player. "Stay close to me," Victor instructed, his tone brokering no argument. Elena nodded, her resolve solidifying. She understood now that this was not just about Victor's world, it was about their world, intertwined and irrevocably linked by the choices they had made. Dimitri's mocking laughter cut through the tension, a reminder that their enemies were still very much present. "You think you can handle this, little girl?" he taunted, attempting to undermine her newfound confidence. "You'll just be another casualty when the dust settles." But Elena stood her ground, a fire igniting in her chest. "I'm not afraid of you, Dmitri. You don't intimidate me." The words surprised her, revealing a sense of courage that had been buried beneath layers of self-doubt. Victor's eyes flashed with a mixture of pride and something deeper, a connection that sparked between them, even in the face of danger. "Enough of this," Victor growled, his voice low and commanding. "We'll deal with you, Dmitri, and your pathetic attempts at intimidation." He gestured for Nikolai to take position, a silent command that spoke volumes about trust and loyalty. Elena watched intently, her heart racing as the dynamics shifted. She was no longer just an observer, but an integral part of their strategy. Suddenly, Dimitri's face contorted with rage. "You think you can just brush me aside? I know more about you than you think, Victor." The threat behind his words lingered in the air, heavy and palpable. Your past will come back to haunt you, and I will make sure of it. Elena's stomach sank at the implications. She could see the flicker of vulnerability in Victor's eyes as he absorbed Dimitri's words. "What do you mean by that?" she pressed, her voice cutting through the tension, demanding answers. Victor's gaze darted to her, a silent warning not to delve deeper, but Elena felt compelled to understand the dangers they faced. Dimitri smirked, relishing the moment. "Oh, you should really ask Victor about his little secrets. There's a reason he's so obsessed with control." The taunt hung in the air, thickening the tension even further. Victor's jaw clenched, revealing the fight that simmered beneath his calm exterior. "Let's not dwell on the past, Dimitri," Victor replied, his voice measured, but Elena could sense the strain behind it. She stepped forward, determined to take control of the narrative. "No more games. What are you really after?" Dimitri's eyes glinted with malice. "I'm after what's rightfully mine. This city doesn't belong to you, or to anyone who thinks they can play at being a king. You've built your empire on the backs of others, Victor, and it's time for the truth to surface." Elena's heart raced as the implications of his words sunk in. Was Victor's empire built on betrayal, on the secrets he kept hidden? She turned to him, searching for answers in his stormy gaze, but she could see the conflict etched on his face. Before she could voice her concerns, Nikolai positioned himself next to Victor, ready for a fight. "Let's finish this then," he declared, his voice steady. Elena felt a rush of adrenaline. They were facing the darkness together, unified against the threat that loomed. "Leave while you can, Dimitri," Victor warned, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Dimitri's laughter echoed again, mocking and filled with disdain. "You think you can scare me off? You've lost your edge, Victor." He motioned to his men positioned outside, their readiness stark against the backdrop of the tense standoff. "Prepare for a reckoning." Elena felt a wave of panic wash over her. They were outnumbered and up against formidable foes. "We have to act now," Elena urged, her voice frantic. "If we don't, we'll be trapped." Victor turned to her, his eyes fierce yet tender, acknowledging her strength. "You're right. Together, we will face them." It was a promise that resonated deep within her, igniting a fierce loyalty that had grown in the shadows of their shared struggles. "On my mark," Victor commanded, the air thick with anticipation. Elena nodded, their connection deepening as time slowed around them. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, a palpable tension that crackled in the air. As Victor gave the signal, Elena's heart raced alongside his, the unspoken bond between them solidifying in the heat of battle. They would face this storm together, each determined to protect the other. The room erupted into chaos, but amidst it all, Elena felt a sense of empowerment. She was ready to fight for her place in this world, side by side with Victor, no longer just a spectator in the shadows of his life. In that moment, she knew this was more than just a battle against adversaries. It was a fight for their future, for the truth, and for the love that had blossomed in the unlikeliest of places. The room was thick with tension, each heartbeat echoing in the silence that followed Dimitri's taunt. Elena held her breath, her mind racing as she processed the implications of his words. Victor's past was a shadow lurking behind him, and she felt an urgent need to understand it, not just for herself, but for the future they were trying to build together. "What does he mean by that, Victor?" she pressed, her voice steady despite the chaos. Victor's dark eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, she saw the flicker of vulnerability beneath his steely exterior. "It doesn't matter," he replied, his voice low and firm. Yet Elena could sense the weight of his secrets pressing down on him. She wasn't about to let him dismiss her concerns so easily. Of course it matters. If there's something Dmitri knows, we need to confront it. We can't fight a battle if we don't know the enemy, she insisted, standing her ground. The fire inside her sparked again, a fierce determination igniting as she recognized her role in this world that had once felt so foreign. Victor's gaze softened, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I never wanted you to be involved in this," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you're right. If we're going to move forward, I can't keep hiding from my past." Elena felt a rush of emotion at his admission. This was the moment she had longed for, the moment he would let her in, not just as a partner in the chaos, but as someone who mattered. "Then let's face it together," she said, her conviction unwavering. "You're not alone in this." Dmitri, who had remained silent during their exchange, scoffed. "How touching. But you think you can just brush aside the ghosts of his past? They'll come back to haunt you both." The mocking tone in his voice grated against her resolve, but Elena refused to let him intimidate her. "Let them come," she shot back, her confidence surging. "I'm not afraid of shadows, Dmitri. I've seen what they can do, and I'm still standing here." Victor's lips curled into a small, appreciative smile, one that made her heart race. "You truly are something else, Elena," he murmured, his voice filled with admiration. As the tension in the room reached a boiling point, Nikolai moved closer, his expression serious. "Boss, we need to act. Dmitri isn't just playing games. He's got men outside, and they're ready to strike." The urgency in Nikolai's voice snapped Victor back to the present. "Fine, we'll deal with Dmitri first, and then we'll address the shadows of my past." He turned to face Dmitri, his expression hardening. "You've underestimated us, Dmitri. We're not the weaklings you think we are." Dmitri's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "We'll see about that. But remember, it's not just my men you have to worry about." Elena felt a chill run down her spine at his words, but Victor stepped forward, his presence commanding. "You think you can threaten me? You've been a thorn in my side for too long, and I'm done playing your games." Before Dmitri could respond, Victor signaled to Nikolai, who moved swiftly to position himself at the door, ready for whatever confrontation awaited them outside. Elena's heart raced as the reality of their situation settled in. This was it. There was no turning back now. "Whatever happens, stay by my side," Victor instructed, his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "I won't let anything happen to you." "I'm not afraid," she replied, her voice steady, the confidence she had found in herself shining through. With that, Victor turned and pushed the door open, stepping into the darkness beyond. The chaos outside was palpable, the sounds of shouts and scuffles echoing in the night air. Elena followed closely, her heart pounding in her chest as they emerged into the fray. In the dim light, she could see Dmitri's men gathered, their faces obscured by shadows, but the malice in their eyes was unmistakable. Victor moved like a force of nature, his presence commanding respect even in the face of danger. Elena felt a surge of pride, standing beside him, ready to face whatever came next. "Let's finish this," Victor growled, his voice low and fierce. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over them. They were no longer just a mafioso and a bystander, they were partners, ready to confront their enemies together. As the confrontation escalated, Elena felt a rush of adrenaline. She had come so far, and now she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Victor's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, a silent promise of support and strength. The chaos erupted around them, shouts and the sounds of a scuffle breaking out as Dimitri's men advanced. Victor stood firm, his body a shield against the encroaching threat. "We will not be broken," he shouted, his voice rising above the tumult. Elena felt a fierce determination as she stood beside him, ready to fight for their future. They were both stronger than they had ever realized, and together they would forge a new path, one that held the promise of love amidst the chaos. As the dust began to settle and the last of Dimitri's men fell back, Victor turned to Elena, his expression softening. "We did it," he said, a mixture of disbelief and pride in his voice. "Yes, together," she replied, her heart swelling with emotion. In that moment, they knew they could face anything, and the shadows of the past no longer held power over them. They had forged a bond stronger than fear, built on trust and mutual respect. As they stood amidst the remnants of the confrontation, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Elena felt a flicker of hope. Their journey was far from over, but they would face it together, hand in hand, ready to navigate whatever challenges awaited them. And as Victor leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, Elena knew that their love would be the guiding light through the darkness, a love that had grown in the unlikeliest of places, blossoming amidst the chaos of the Bratva. Together, they would write their own story, one filled with strength, resilience, and an unbreakable bond that would withstand the trials of the world around them.